The FBI couldn't believe their eyes. This story shocked the entire nation. In a quiet, safe, small town, a 9-year-old girl vanishes without a trace. The prime suspect isn't a serial killer or a career criminal, but her 15-year-old neighbor, a quiet model student who helps out at the local church every Sunday. The FBI is convinced it's all a terrible mistake until they find her personal diary. A single entry written on the day of the disappearance is enough to make their blood run cold. But even that horror is nothing compared to what they heard during the interrogation, when the girl calmly, almost indifferently, explained her motive. Hello everyone, Dwight here again. Before we dive into today's shocking case, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on what's next. It only takes 1 second, and as always, it's completely free. Now for the fun part, confess in the comments. Where are you watching from, what time it is, what's the weather like, and what snacks are you munching on for this story? You know, after all the time I've spent researching true crime cases, I thought it was hard to surprise me anymore, but this case is truly insane. And the strangest part is just how little attention it's gotten. I want you to imagine for a second the place where all of this happened. The small town of Street Martins, Missouri. It doesn't have a catchy nickname or any tourist attractions. Its main feature is something else: perfect order and silence. This is the classic American dream. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and at the center of it all, an old Catholic church built by German settlers. It's an atmosphere of perpetual calm, where it feels like nothing ever happens. And to make sure you fully grasp the atmosphere, here's a fact. Not a single serious crime had been registered here for many decades before this story. The police were only ever called for things like getting a cat out of a tree. But in the fall of 2009, this sleepy silence was shattered. A crime occurred so brutal for a place like this that the news of it instantly spread across the entire country. And at the center of this story was a girl who grew up in the very heart of this idol, Alyssa Bustamante. She was born in 1994. Her mother was only 15 at the time and already had serious problems with the law, addiction, theft, and related charges. Alyssa's father was no better. He had his own history with law enforcement and a generally violent past. And so when Alyssa was still just an infant, he was sent to prison for assault. Alyssa had 3 other siblings, twin brothers and a younger sister named Emma. So the childhood of these 4 children, well, you definitely couldn't call it stable. They lived in constant uncertainty. They never knew if they'd have to pack their things the next day because of another eviction, or if they'd even have food to eat. And so when Alyssa turned 8, something happened that was supposed to change everything. Her maternal grandparents, Karen and Gary, stepped in. They decided they had had enough and obtained full custody of Alyssa and her siblings. For Alyssa, it felt like a chance to start over, to get a new life. Her grandparents decided to start with a clean slate. They gathered the children and moved to a new town, that same Street Martins in Missouri. There, they bought a large house on a spacious lot. They thought this tiny, quiet town in the countryside was the perfect place to give the kids the stability they never had. And, you know, at first it was just like that. Her grandparents were right. Alyssa finally began to live like a normal kid. She went to school, she made friends, she even started going to church and was active in the youth group. At home, she spent time with her siblings, just doing everyday things, and it seemed that she was adapting well for the most part. But when her teenage years began, something started to change. Her style of dress and appearance transformed into what's known as emo. If you're not familiar with it, just imagine dark hair, black clothes, sometimes dark eyeshadow around the eyes, and, you know, a somewhat distant, emotionless look. The word emo comes from emotional, meaning it's a way of expressing oneself. She started having behavioral problems at home. And from the outside, it looked like a typical teenage rebellion, a difficult phase. Her grandparents hoped that the new life would still help the children avoid the long-term effects of their childhood trauma. But the thing is, Alyssa, being the oldest, had experienced and remembered much more than the other children. She had deep-seated issues related to abandonment, and she never had a relationship with her father at all. Her mother complicated the situation. When she would visit her parents, she often gave Alyssa hope. She would say things like, "This time, I'm really gonna get it right. Maybe soon we can all live together again." They were just words that gave Alyssa false hope. Time and time again, she heard these promises, but nothing ever changed. They never became one family again. For Alyssa, this was devastating. She would cry, and her grandmother, seeing this, would cry with her. She was heartbroken and emotionally crushed. Ultimately, her grandmother loved her own daughter and didn't want to take her children away. She only took that step when the situation became absolutely critical. So, what Alyssa was going through wasn't just typical teenage angst. It was something much darker, much deeper. And over time, it turned into a true downward spiral. And this spiral was leading her in one very dark direction, and Alyssa became obsessed with the topic of death. Her grandmother, Karen, saw these changes. She understood that this wasn't just a normal teenage phase. Eventually, she came across some of Alyssa's posts on social media. Alyssa spent 10 days at a treatment center called Pathways. There, she was given 2 diagnoses, major depression and borderline personality disorder. The doctors prescribed her the drug Prozac. So by the time Alyssa turned 15, she was still taking Prozac. Whether it was helping, well, the events that followed will probably answer that question. Meanwhile, her younger sister Emma, who was 6 at the time, had adapted to life much better. She had just started school and had already made friends with kids in the neighborhood. One of her friends was a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth. Even though Emma was younger, they got along great. Elizabeth lived very close by, literally 4 houses away, so she often came over to Emma's to play. And so we come to the evening of October 21st, 2009. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, Emma knocked on Elizabeth's door and asked if she wanted to come out and play. Elizabeth's mom, Patty, agreed, but with one condition. Her daughter had to be back home no later than 6. As far as Patty knew, the girls went to Emma's house and played outside. After a while, Elizabeth left to go home. Emma stayed outside for a little longer, but then she accidentally fell into some thorny bushes, which, happens. They're kids. It took a few minutes for Emma to get anyone's attention. Finally, Alyssa heard her. She came outside and said something like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad my window was open so I could hear you. I was inside." While Alyssa was helping Emma get out, Emma noticed blood on her thigh. Alyssa explained that she had started her period and asked her not to tell anyone. And it was from this moment that the events of that evening began to unfold in a way they never should have. The thing is, Elizabeth, who Emma thought had gone home, never returned. Her mom, Patty, started to worry because it was already past the time she was due back. She called her daughter again and again. It was completely uncharacteristic for Elizabeth to disobey her mom. But Elizabeth didn't answer. So Patty, now in a panic, called Karen, Alyssa's grandmother, and asked if Elizabeth was at her house. It was already late, and the answer was no. Karen told Patty that she didn't even know the girls were playing together that day. For Patty, this was an alarm bell. A million thoughts raced through her head, but she knew one thing for sure. Her daughter was terrified of the dark. She would never have stayed outside at this hour on her own unless something had gone seriously wrong. None of it added up, so Patty, without hesitation, called the police. A full-scale search began shortly after. Police officers and local residents combed the woods and the surrounding area looking for the 9-year-old Elizabeth. Investigators immediately questioned Emma, as she was the last person who had seen the missing girl. Emma told them everything as it happened. They played outside, then Elizabeth went home, and after that, her sister Alyssa helped her out of the bushes. The girls' houses were located next to a large, dense, wooded area. So, investigators asked Emma again and again if Elizabeth might have cut through the woods to get home. But Emma was adamant. She said they were both very afraid of the woods and would never have gone in there. But still, there was no sign of Elizabeth, no signs of a struggle or anything suspicious. The investigators were baffled. Where could a 9-year-old child have gone? This wasn't a big city. You can't get very far here. A child could have only made it to the neighboring houses. The search in the woods continued all day, all night, and into the next day. Up to this point, the case was handled by the local police, but now they called the FBI for help. About 300 volunteers joined the search, and together they combed an area of approximately 1 square mile. The terrain there was difficult, dense, damp forest, hills, and several small ponds. The investigators' main hope was Elizabeth's cell phone. They were waiting for data from the service provider, hoping it would help them narrow down the search area. While they waited, they did everything they could. They brought in dive teams to check the ponds. Helicopters were deployed to help with the search. They also tracked down and interviewed every registered sex offender in the area. And it's worth noting, for a town with a population of only 1,000 people, there was a surprisingly high number of them. The police also stopped every car on the nearby road, asking drivers if they had seen Elizabeth, but nothing came of it. Finally, the phone data came back, and what it revealed was shocking. Elizabeth's phone wasn't just on, it was actively pinging or sending a signal from right near her house. The investigators immediately returned to that area for a thorough search, but it was too late. The phone's battery had died, and the signal was gone. We all know how geolocation works. It's not always precise and usually just shows an approximate radius. Unfortunately for the police, even though they had a general area, that radius was still quite large and covered 60 acres of forest. What if Elizabeth had managed to move from that spot and was now lost, trying to find her way home? About 24 hours had passed since she was last seen, and the second night of the search was approaching. Emma, Alyssa's younger sister, had been extremely worried the whole time. She went to her grandmother, Karen, and said she wanted to talk to the police again. It turned out she had quite a few things she wanted to confess. Emma admitted that playing with Elizabeth wasn't her idea. In fact, it was her older sister, Alyssa, who had asked her to go and see if Elizabeth wanted to play that day. Emma went on to say that when she and Elizabeth were playing outside, Alyssa came out and told her, Emma, to leave them alone so that she could play with Elizabeth by herself. And it was right after that, according to Emma, that Elizabeth said she couldn't play anymore and had to go home. The investigators immediately remembered that they had already checked Elizabeth's cell phone call logs, and indeed, there was one call from Alyssa that day. Emma's new timeline of events matched the time of that call perfectly. Emma also repeated the story about how Alyssa had helped her out of the bushes and about the blood on her thigh, which Alyssa had explained away as her period. Now, in light of the new testimony, this detail seemed very strange to the investigators. They asked Emma why she hadn't mentioned all this before when they first spoke with her, and she said it was because her sister had forbidden her to. 2 days after the disappearance, as the search party with FBI agents was combing the woods, they came across a rectangular hole. And let's just say it didn't look like just a hole. It looked like a freshly dug grave. They started asking everyone who lived nearby, including Alyssa and her brothers. And Alyssa calmly said, "Yeah, I dug it." She explained that she and her brothers were always digging holes, just to have something to do. Her brother confirmed this story. The police were puzzled, but partially believed them because there were in fact many other holes in their backyard near the garden. They searched that rectangular hole, but found nothing. Not Elizabeth, not her phone, and no other signs that she had been there. However, even though they had believed the kids' stories about digging holes on the surface, this whole thing still felt off. The holes, combined with Emma's new version of events, were enough for the FBI to get a warrant to search Alyssa's house. Inside the house, everything looked completely normal. But when investigators opened the door to Alyssa's room, it became clear they were not dealing with a typical 15-year-old teenager. The room looked more like a cell in a psychiatric institution or Freddy Krueger's office. The room was a complete mess, with trash everywhere. For the investigators, this was a shock. Who was this girl? Why was she so obsessed with blood? And how could her grandmother, living in the same house, not have noticed this? They continued the search and found her diary. Opening it, they discovered entries of a very disturbing nature. On one of the pages, Alyssa described her desire to kill people. Specifically, she wrote about wanting to burn the house down with her entire family inside. Another entry read, "If I don't talk about it, I will keep it inside, and when I explode, someone will die." Near the end of the diary, there was another entry that Alyssa had meticulously scribbled over with a pen, probably thinking no one would ever be able to read it. But when the agents held the page up to the light, they were able to make out two words, and the investigators seized the diary as well as the sheets from her bed, which had traces of blood on them. The next day, the FBI brought Alyssa in for questioning. They told her it was to clarify some routine questions, but by that point, she was already the prime suspect in Elizabeth's disappearance. Because Alyssa was a minor, her grandmother was present in the room with her during the interrogation, along with a juvenile consultant and a lawyer. Alyssa's entire interrogation was recorded on video. And here I have to mention the YouTube channel Explore With Us. They did a simply phenomenal job analyzing Alyssa's behavior during her conversation with the investigators. I'll leave a link in the description because this is probably one of the strangest interrogations you could ever see, primarily because it's being given by a 15-year-old girl. The full video is almost 2 hours long, and I highly recommend watching it. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but I will show you some key moments because otherwise it's simply impossible to convey the full picture of her behavior. So, first, Alyssa tells her version of what happened on the day Elizabeth disappeared.
I came home on the bus, and I got home around 3. No, 4. 3:30. 3:30, 4. I get home around then, and I just hung out in my room for a little while. And then I went for a walk around 4:35, something like that. I was just walking around in the forest for a while. And I was supposed to take my little sister with me, but I ditched her because she's annoying.
Okay.
And I was just walking around in the forest. And then for about an hour, I came back around 5:36-ish. And I went up in my room, and I heard like yelling. So I went outside, and she was down in the ditch area. She was stuck in thorn bushes. So I went down there, and I helped her out. And she asked me why I was bleeding, because, I found out on my period.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, don't tell anyone that. And so we went out there, and my brother and Anthony were asking about it because she was supposed to be at home or something.
Okay.
And I didn't really think much of it, so we just went back.
And right away, Alyssa starts playing defense, trying to cover for a lie she knows she's almost been caught in. She knows Emma has spoken to the police again and told them the truth, so this story about walking in the woods is her way of preemptively explaining why she was there. And honestly, for a 15-year-old, it's a pretty calculated move. But what's even more striking isn't the move itself, but how calmly and confidently she lies. It's like breathing for her, just completely natural. For a while, Alyssa continues to answer questions in this same cool, collected manner. And this is where the FBI detective, a man named Rice, comes into play. And I have to say, the way he handles this interrogation is just phenomenal. It's a true psychological chess match. He doesn't apply pressure. He doesn't make accusations. He simply asks her to tell him about the events of that day again. And then again, each time, he changes the questions just slightly. He's calmly watching, waiting for cracks to appear in her perfectly constructed story, waiting for some small detail to trip her up as she starts to get tired and stressed. Next, Detective Rice asks her a seemingly simple question. What did she feel when she saw everyone searching for Elizabeth?
I didn't think it would, happen. Things like this don't happen to you,
Tell me about
well, she's 9.
Okay.
I don't really know that much about her either.
Tell me what you do know about her.
Okay. She'd come over and swim. She's kind of girly,
Okay.
not naturistic, I guess you could say. She can be annoying.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's been, there were some folks out there out in the forest, I guess, digging some holes or looking at some holes.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, they had said that you like to go out there and dig holes. So, I'm going to have to ask you some stuff about yourself.
Okay.
Because, obviously that plays in there if they were looking at holes and you're out there in the forest and that sort of thing. So,
Right.
I guess just tell me a little bit about yourself so I understand where all this is coming from.
I really like nature, animals, being outside. It's just, naturistic like that. And I get bored really easily, and I'm entertained really easily.
Okay.
So, digging holes is just something to do.
She also adds that sometimes when she finds dead animals, she buries them in these holes, supposedly out of respect. When the detective asks her specifically about that one grave-like hole, she replies that she dug it on Sunday, a few days before Elizabeth's disappearance. And when he asks why, she says she was just really bored that day. And this is where her story starts to show its first crack. The detective asked her to specify the exact time she was digging the hole. To add some credibility to her story, she even tries to bring in a witness, saying something along the lines of, "Ask my grandpa, he would know."
We were at Mom's house, I believe. I was at my mom's house for the weekend.
Okay.
She lives at the lake. And we came back around 5, and I know I dug it before dark, so it was sometime in between. Wait, what time did we come home?
I didn't pick you up till 6.
Well, it must have been in between 6:37, I guess.
You picked her up where?
Eugene.
You picked her up at 6 p.m. at Eugene?
Right.
And it's how long the drive?
I found
So you got back home 6:30, 6:45-ish probably?
maybe right at 6:30.
6:30?
About 25 minutes.
Well, it's getting dark by then.
Yeah.
Well,
So you got home at 6:30,
yeah.
and how did you dig a hole at what? So what did you
Well,
do
that's
Sunday? Well, I'm not asking what your grandpa. When you got home at 6:30 at Sunday, what did you do then?
Oh, I think I took a shower and went to sleep, so I don't think I did it. I think it was Saturday, actually. No, because I wasn't here Saturday.
After a moment, she says it might have been Friday. Then, that she doesn't remember for sure. Detective Rice sees she's getting tangled in her own story, so he asks her a logical question. He says, you didn't dig it on Monday, you didn't dig it on Tuesday, and Elizabeth disappeared on Wednesday. So when exactly did you dig it? Alyssa keeps trying to find an answer, and it seems to finally dawn on her that the detective just isn't buying her story. And this is where Rice uses one of the most powerful psychological tactics in an interrogation. Explore with us, mentioned this as well. He just goes completely silent. And you're about to see just how masterfully the detective chose this tactic. It's honestly incredible. I've rewatched this moment several times. He lets the silence build, creating an unbearable, awkward tension in the room. The thinking behind it is simple. A person who is lying can't stand the silence and will start talking just to fill the void. Talking just for the sake of talking. And that's exactly what Alyssa does.
I guess. I was digging. I mean, whatever shape comes to mind. I was just entertaining myself.
The reason I'm asking, it just seems like and you can understand why, as if people were out in the woods looking for a person, if they were lost, or God forbid, looking for, if they thought it was God forbid, a body, why they would be alarmed by that hole, because they're, come along a hole, freshly dug hole that was.
Alyssa nods her head, as if to show that she completely understands. Yes, it's weird. Yes, it's logical that you're asking about it. We're on the same page. She carries herself as if she's not a suspect, but just someone helping with the investigation. And this is when Detective Rice makes his next move. He calmly starts telling her about the technology the FBI has at its disposal. Something like a ground-penetrating sonar, a device that can scan the earth and see everything that's under the surface. He explains that with this technology, they can determine exactly when the hole was dug, whether it's old or recent. Essentially, he's giving her one last chance to change her story before, as he puts it, the technology proves she's lying. And after a brief pause, he asks her again if this is the only hole of its kind that she's dug.
It's not completely like this, but it's like, kind of like that.
Okay.
Like
so
big
this,
enough for a shoebox.
okay, but this is the first time of that size.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But what about the big round ones that I kept falling in? And I mean, they're deep. And I kept telling the kids, "Would you guys quit doing this? Because they're dangerous." And we used to ride our horses up there, and I could break
Sure.
a leg. I mean, they're huge.
Okay.
There's like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
And this is on our property.
Digging pits for what?
I don't know.
It was entertaining.
Okay.
And we like to make traps, just occasionally, put some sticks over it and some leaves.
Yeah, we
For you to break a leg.
we pull them in, yeah.
Well, if they have horses, that's not a good idea, Alyssa.
Well, we don't ride our horses
You
up
know,
there.
I was going to say, if a horse breaks
Right,
It's like
right.
what happens.
I know, but
Yeah.
we didn't do that. We can ride our horses up there.
Well, we used to. We haven't.
We used to, but we don't.
You have horses. You have horses.
I do.
They're not rectangle. They're
Big round ones.
big round. I don't know what that matters.
Okay.
And right at that moment, as her grandmother jumps into the conversation and the detective reacts with a laugh, the tension in the room breaks for a second. The conversation almost seems to return to a normal, everyday track. Alyssa's reaction to this is very telling. She remains perfectly calm, cool, and collected. You get the impression she's even relieved that her grandmother jumped in. This little break gives her a chance to regroup and get her composure back.
She's still missing. They're out looking for her. They don't want more volunteers because there's a lot of volunteers so far. This is really big. They've had helicopters
Yeah, they have.
searching as well. And I don't know, that's pretty much what I know.
It's very sad for her.
Yeah,
Could you
her-
imagine if it was missing? God, it would be awful.
Yeah, and her mom, her family has.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they're making such a big deal about this. I mean, can you, like you said, you can understand why all this
thundering
is
down
going
the
on.
stairs when I was screaming outside. I mean, I just can't.
I know, I've got kids, so I can't
Mhm.
hear that.
Alyssa shows absolutely no emotion, and this is where the story takes an even darker turn. Detective Rice, seeing her complete composure, asks a direct, logical question. In her opinion, what happened to Elizabeth?
Did the FBI do a search or something of the house where you guys lived?
Mhm.
Tell me about that. What was that all about?
They searched our house, I guess, for any signs of, and they found stuff in my room, but not like evidence like that.
Has ever been in the house? I mean, she's coming
She
over to
has
visit
been in
with
the
them.
house, yes.
Yeah, I assume if she's a neighbor girl, she's probably been over there, so not a big deal there. So you said they searched your room.
Yes.
Other than marijuana seeds and that sort of stuff, did they find anything?
Nope.
Okay, did they take anything?
They took my sheet and
Okay.
a pillowcase, I think.
Did they take anything else?
I don't think so. I haven't really surveyed anything.
Okay.
I think they took clothes
Oh, they took a pair of pants.
Okay.
and a diary. I mean, they gave us the list. It's not all coming to me what was on the list, but there's a long list. They gave us the list. It's not all coming to me what was on the list, but there's a long list.
Your diary. Okay. You ever gone through the diary?
I've looked at some of it, yes.
Did you know that?
No,
Does it make you angry?
a little.
It's kind of your private, personal thoughts, isn't it?
I don't know about you, but I'm looking at this and I'm just curious. What do you guys think? Seriously, let me know in the comments. Is she lying or is she telling the truth? Because honestly, looking at her composure, even though she makes a few small mistakes, well, it's impressive for a 15-year-old. You get the feeling she talks to cops every Sunday after church. But let's get back to the diary that the FBI seized from her house. The thing is, Alyssa had no idea about one crucial detail. She thought that the entry she had so carefully scribbled over, no one would ever be able to read. She didn't know that the FBI has technology that allows them to see what was written underneath a layer of ink. But Detective Rice knew this the entire time. He knew exactly what was in that entry even before the interrogation began. And now, Alyssa was about to be confronted with it. So, that same entry Alyssa had tried so hard to hide was dated Wednesday, October 21st, the day Elizabeth disappeared. And here's what it said, verbatim. I just f***ing killed someone, I strangled her, out, and now she's dead. I don't know how to feel right now. It was amazing. Once you get over the feeling of, oh my God, I can't do this, it's pretty enjoyable. Although I'm a little nervous and shaky right now, okay, I have to go to church now. LOL. I can just imagine the face of the investigator nearly choking on his donut when he first read these lines. It's just f***ing insane. And now, let's go back to that interrogation room where Detective Rice has just made it clear to Alyssa that he's read all of it. All her calm, all her cold confidence, it all vanishes in an instant. The look on her face changes completely as it dawns on her that her biggest secret is not a secret anymore.
And then what happened from there?
I went in the forest. Like I said, and was it there?
Yeah.
So, party.
Honestly, it's absolute madness. This diary entry just gives you goosebumps. It's not even about what she wrote, but how she wrote it. She's not just confessing, she's bragging about it. She describes the murder with such a mundane, almost teenage enthusiasm, saying what an incredible feeling it was. And the climax of it all is the final line. I have to go to church now. LOL. It's this combination of brutality and complete indifference that makes the entry so sick and disturbing.
I think you dug the hole ahead of time because you knew you were going to kill him. I think you tried to dig the hole, like I said, and realized it was too hard to dig down that far. And I think you got out there and knew you were going to kill her. And then you Is that what happened?
And the silence lasts for 70 seconds. A full 70 seconds. That's an incredibly long time when you're sitting across from an FBI agent in an interrogation room. But Alyssa just sits there, motionless, with a complete stone face, as if it's some kind of psychological battle and she's trying to win it. Finally, Detective Rice says, "We both know what this is about," and directly asks where Elizabeth Island Alyssa continues to play dumb. And here, something strange happens. The juvenile consultant, who is supposed to be protecting Alyssa's interests, says something to her along the lines of, "Be honest. If you know what happened, you can say it." Essentially, she's pushing her to confess, which is the investigator's job, not the lawyer's. And as we'll see, this had serious consequences. Grandma Karen, who is still in the room, also feels this tension. She tries to fill the silence and says, "I don't know what's in that diary, I don't know the truth." And at that exact moment, Alyssa breaks. She finally admits that an accident happened. She falls right into the trap the detective set for her, a trap to get her to confess to times something, even a lesser crime. The grandmother's reaction is immediate. She starts crying loudly and turns away. She's so upset that she leaves the room for a moment and comes back with a box of tissues. Meanwhile, Alyssa, with her head down and making sounds that resemble crying, tells her story. She and Elizabeth were playing in the woods. Elizabeth fell, hit her head, and died. But that's not all. After telling the story about the fall, Alyssa adds another detail. She says that after this, she gathered some twigs, built a fire, and it's clear that this is complete nonsense. It's practically impossible to build a fire in the woods that's hot enough for that. But Detective Rice doesn't even argue with her. He ignores this new wild lie and immediately goes back to her weak spot, the hole. And here it seems he switches into Hans Landa mode from Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. Rice says, "If you really dug that hole on Friday, as you claimed, that means you did it 5 days before this accident happened." And in that moment, Alyssa realizes she's backed herself into a corner. She has just, in essence, confessed that the whole thing was planned. The detective presses her again, demanding to know how Elizabeth really died, and reminds her that the truth will come out one way or another. So now, as the full horror of what's happened sinks in for Karen, her grandmother that her granddaughter has just confessed to murder, she, completely devastated, leaves the room, but this isn't the last we'll hear from her. Detective Rice, however, doesn't waste a single second. He doesn't give Alyssa a moment to breathe and immediately continues the interrogation.
I think you dug the hole ahead of time because you knew you were going to kill him. I think you tried to dig the hole, like I said, and realized it was too hard to dig down that far. And I think you got out there and knew you were going to kill her. And then you Is that what happened?
Alyssa continues her story. According to her, she stabbed Elizabeth 2 times, but only after she had already and she was dead. And here's a detail that's just hard to wrap your head around. She said she used a regular kitchen knife for this, and when it was all over, she simply washed it and put it back in the kitchen sink. But here too, Alyssa was lying. She led the detectives to the place where she hid Elizabeth's body. The autopsy revealed that the girl had actually been stabbed 8 times, not 2. The investigation also questioned Alyssa's boyfriend, Dustin, but it was quickly determined that he had nothing to do with it. Thus, Alyssa was the only one responsible for the planned and brutal murder of the 9-year-old girl. Elizabeth was buried about a week after her disappearance. People described her as a sweet, kind, and cheerful child. She loved school, and her favorite subject was the drama club. She was just preparing for a new school play, and her favorite color was pink. At her funeral, her pink and white casket was carried in a horse-drawn carriage, and pink balloons were released into the sky in memory of her short life. When the news leaked out to the town, everyone was shocked. Alyssa wasn't some strange, reclusive kid. She had friends, good grades. Her teacher said she was smart and never caused any behavioral problems. It's just that none of them knew what she was really like. Alyssa was charged with first-degree murder, and they decided to try her as an adult due to the extreme brutality of the crime. The prosecutors argued that this was a thrill kill, meaning she did it just for the fun of it, to find out what it was like to kill someone, which in fact was what her diary was all about. The prosecutor, Mark Richardson, demanded a sentence of life in prison plus 71 years, a symbolic punishment for the years of life stolen from Elizabeth. He officially stated that such a sentence was entirely appropriate. The defense attorneys, on the other hand, said that this was essentially a death sentence for a child and asked for her severe depression and previous suicide attempts to be considered as mitigating factors. Despite her confession and the fact that she herself led the police to the body, Alyssa pleaded not guilty. While she awaited trial, she was held in custody without the possibility of bail. There, she reportedly tried to harm herself again, this time with her own fingernails. She showed clear signs of severe anxiety and depression and was subsequently placed under constant supervision. She was later sent to a psychiatric center for evaluation. And so, before the trial began, Alyssa's lawyer made a strong move. He filed a motion to have the interrogation and the confession we just discussed excluded from the evidence. The argument was this: the juvenile consultant who was present in the room acted not as a protector but as an investigator, and through her actions essentially tricked Alyssa into confessing. And the judge agreed with this. Alyssa's confession was completely thrown out of the case, and the proceedings were delayed. Around this same time, the U.S. Supreme Court was considering the issue of whether it is cruel and unusual punishment to sentence minors to life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. And you know, this raises a difficult question. I'm genuinely interested in what you think about this. Should a teenager, regardless of the crime, receive the same sentence as an adult? Do children have the capacity to change? And where do you draw that line? Please let me know in the comments, because there's no simple answer here. So, since the main piece of evidence, the confession, was no longer valid, and because the laws might change, the prosecutors decided to offer Alyssa a deal. They proposed that she plead guilty to second-degree murder instead of first-degree. The only condition was that Alyssa had to testify under oath about what really happened between her and Elizabeth. A separate charge for armed criminal action for using the knife was also included. Alyssa agreed. On the day of the hearing, as the 18-year-old Alyssa began to speak, a loud gasp went through the courtroom. First, they brought up the antidepressant Prozac again. They claimed that the drug, the dosage of which had been increased just 2 weeks before the murder, could have provoked her aggression. One of the defense's expert witnesses, a psychiatrist named Edwin Johnston, even testified that Prozac can cause violent outbursts, especially in young women, and that it was one of the key factors in this crime. Second, defense psychologists described Alyssa as a deeply traumatized child suffering from severe depression with symptoms of borderline and bipolar disorders. They hoped that her life story would explain her mental state at the moment of the murder. For the prosecution, everything was simpler. They didn't need to say much. It was enough to just read that same entry from her diary. Regarding Prozac, they called their own expert, Dr. Anthony Rothschild. He stated that there is no credible evidence in medical literature that this drug can lead to murder. The 2-day sentencing hearing was very emotional. Alyssa spent most of the time just sitting and staring at a single point, showing no signs of remorse or grief. Elizabeth's family, quite understandably, was filled with hatred. During her statement, Elizabeth's mom, Patty, called Alyssa an evil monster and said that she hated her. She was trembling so much with rage that the judge had to ask her to take a break. Alyssa also gave a final statement. She said, "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would. I'm so sorry." At this moment, Elizabeth's family was crying, and Alyssa's grandparents, unable to bear it, ran out of the courtroom. On February 8th, 2012, less than 2 weeks before her 18th birthday, Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole plus 30 years for the armed criminal action charge. A few months later, Elizabeth's mom, Patty, filed a civil lawsuit against Alyssa, the Pathways Psychiatric Center, and the doctors who had worked with her. She claimed they should have seen the danger. The center responded that, according to their notes, Alyssa posed a threat only to herself. Ultimately, the judge dismissed the lawsuit against the doctors in the center, leaving Alyssa as the sole defendant. A few years later, Patty received a $5 million settlement. Meanwhile, Alyssa got a new legal team, which filed a motion to vacate her sentence. They argued that her previous lawyers had given her bad advice by pushing her to take a plea deal instead of waiting for the Supreme Court's decision on juvenile sentencing. Judge Patricia Joyce denied the motion, stating that the evidence against Alyssa was so overwhelming that the plea deal had been her best option. As often happens, Alyssa gained online supporters and entire communities who claim her trial was unfair. It's hard to understand their logic, considering she confessed twice. Perhaps they blame everything on her mental health. In any case, such support seems strange to say the least and disrespectful to Elizabeth's family. Alyssa is currently at the Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri. In November 2022, the state passed a new law. According to it, minors sentenced to long terms get the right to a parole hearing after 15 years. Thanks to this change, Alyssa got her first such hearing in July 2024. This news, of course, caused a major public outcry, and Elizabeth's family actively campaigned against any possibility of her release. So, in July 2024, the hearing took place. The parole board denied her request. The next hearing was scheduled for 5 years later, in 2029. But there's an important legal point to know here. Even if she had miraculously been granted parole for the murder, she would have had to immediately start serving her second sentence, those same 30 years for armed criminal action, as the sentences run consecutively. So, in essence, her release in the coming decades is practically impossible. According to available information, she has no serious disciplinary violations in prison and participates in available programs. And finally, I'm genuinely interested to know what you think. Should minors be tried as adults in such brutal cases? Let me know your opinion in the comments. Thank you for your attention. If this story struck you, don't forget to hit the like button and of course subscribe to the channel. By the way, I'm already working on a new Simply Incredible case, and most likely as you're watching this, it's already in the final stages of editing. While you wait, I suggest you check out one of the videos that have now appeared on your screen. Click on any of them. Believe me, the stories there are no less shocking, so I highly recommend it. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and most importantly, take care of your children, and God bless America.